All right, today we are diving into the incredible story of ancient India's very first great empire, and we're going to focus on the unbelievable transformation of its most famous ruler, a man who went from being this totally feared warrior to a champion of peace. Let's get into it.
So, how is it possible for one person to be known as both a ruthless conqueror who caused just immense suffering, and also a champion of peace who ruled with kindness? I mean, that's the central puzzle of the Emperor Ashoka's story.
So our story kicks off way back in the 4th century BCE in a region of eastern India called Magadha. Now this place was an absolute powerhouse. It was rich with fertile soil for farming and had tons of iron ore for making strong tools and weapons. Basically, it was the perfect launchpad for building an empire.
Okay, so here's a quick look at the timeline to get us oriented. The Mauryan Empire was founded around 321 BCE. Ashoka comes to power a few decades later, and the whole dynasty lasts for just under 150 years. But what they managed to do in that time was, well, pretty extraordinary.
And just to give you a sense of the scale we're talking about, the Mauryan Empire united almost the entire Indian subcontinent. It covered an area that was nearly 2/3 the size of the United States today. That is a massive, massive amount of territory to control.
The guy who started it all, Chandragupta Maurya, was a strategic genius. He was guided by his super clever advisor, Chanakya, and he built a professional army with these fearsome war elephants. He also used a really complex spy network to maintain control, and he even created a single currency to make trade easier across his huge kingdom. He really built a very strong foundation.
Eventually, the empire was passed down to Chandragupta's grandson, Ashoka, who became emperor around 268 BCE. And in his early years, Ashoka was maybe even more ambitious than his grandfather. He was absolutely determined to expand the empire's borders through conquest.
His most famous military campaign was against the wealthy coastal kingdom of Kalinga, and this war was incredibly brutal. It's estimated that over 100,000 people were killed in the fighting. Ashoka won the battle, for sure, but the cost was just devastating.
And this was the turning point. After walking through the battlefield, seeing the absolute destruction he had caused, Ashoka was just filled with horror and regret. This bloody victory didn't feel like a victory at all. It changed him completely.
Witnessing all that devastation basically set Ashoka on a completely new path. The ruthless conqueror decided he was going to become a ruler of peace, and that journey would redefine his entire reign and his legacy.
You see, after the war, Ashoka converted to Buddhism, and he embraced this core principle called ahimsa. Ahimsa is the idea of nonviolence toward all living things, and that doesn't just mean people, but animals too. This became the new foundation for how he would rule.
And he put this into practice right away. He gave up the royal tradition of hunting and started going on religious pilgrimages instead. He ordered that animals be treated with kindness. He even declared that true victory wasn't about conquering land, but about winning people's hearts and minds through virtue.
So, Ashoka had this huge personal change of heart, right? But how do you get an entire empire of millions to follow your lead? He needed a way to get his new philosophy out to everyone.
I mean, really think about it. There's no internet, no TV, no social media. How on earth do you teach millions of people a whole new way of thinking? Well, Ashoka came up with a pretty brilliant and, as it turns out, lasting solution.
He started promoting this concept called Dhamma. Now, it's really important to understand that Dhamma wasn't a new religion. It was more like a universal moral code, a set of ethical rules like being honest, having self-control, and showing kindness that people of any faith could follow to live a good life.
So here's his 3-step plan. First, he had his messages, which were called edicts, carved onto these massive stone pillars. Some were 40 feet tall, and he placed them where everyone could see them. You can think of them like ancient billboards. Second, he created a special group of officials whose whole job was to travel the empire and teach these values. And third, he actively promoted religious tolerance, asking everyone to respect the beliefs of others. But his new philosophy wasn't just about ideas, it was about action. Ashoka launched these huge public works projects. He built a vast network of roads, and he had them lined with shade trees and dotted with wells and rest houses for travelers. He made trade and travel safer and easier for everyone. And, incredibly, he established hospitals for both people and animals, one of the first rulers in history to focus on public health care for all living beings.
So let's talk about the long-term impact. The Mauryan Empire itself, well, it eventually fell.
But Ashoka's reign left a legacy that stretches all the way to the modern day. A huge part of his legacy was the spread of Buddhism. He actually sent missionaries to other countries like Sri Lanka and Burma, and his efforts were absolutely key in transforming Buddhism from a small local faith into a major world religion with millions of followers today. And check this out. This is such a cool visual connection. On the left, you're seeing the top of one of Ashoka's pillars, a carving of 4 lines from over 2,000 years ago. And on the right, that very same symbol is now the official national emblem of modern India, a direct link from the ancient empire to today. Now, after Ashoka died, the empire began to weaken. His successors just weren't as strong, and eventually, the last Mauryan king was overthrown. The physical empire, the one that was built on military power, it didn't last. So that leaves us with this big final question to think about. Ashoka's story really shows us 2 different kinds of power. The Mauryan Empire, the one built with swords, lasted about 150 years. But Ashoka's ideas of nonviolence, ethical living, and public welfare, well, those are still being discussed and admired thousands of years later. So, which one is truly more powerful?